TPR.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the TPR Pod. Today's episode is with Nadir Nahdi. Nadir is a content creator extraordinaire. His work is primarily centered around issues of culture, identity, intersections between the two, him exploring his own multi-ethnic background. You should really head over to his Instagram and his YouTube to really experience his work directly. I think that'll be a way better way for you to understand where what I'm talking about rather than me explaining it. This episode is about his recent trip to Pakistan, which he did earlier this year or towards the end of last year. Um, I was interested in talking to Nader because I saw him online on all over social media when he was meeting a lot of people we knew, Mr. Buggy, Omnomzilla, Zohib Ghazi. He was all over the place. And so I followed his Instagram and his journey through Pakistan. And I wanted to talk to him about a lot of things that he's doing because he's doing a lot of things. But it became specifically about sort of exploring and searching for your identity, in this case, as like a Pakistani person who is perhaps diaspora Pakistani, born abroad, going back to Pakistan to discover or, things that he's heard about, listened about from his parents and grandparents, or me, somebody who's grown up more closer to Pakistan in those circles, moving abroad, moving away from what you would consider your identity and how to deal with that, how those intersect. But a big part of it was, we're on this kick of people discovering Pakistan for the first time through their eyes. So that's primarily a lot of what we talked about. Breakdown of everything discussed in the chapters below. Now, there's a really interesting guy to speak to, much more interesting than I thought he'd be interesting, but he was much more interesting than I expected. Hopefully, we'll have him on soon. Maybe we'll run into each other. He lives close by. But before that, part number 149 with Nadir Nahdi. Okay. Speaking of being productive, then, just jumping right into it, you do a whole bunch of things. So I wasn't really sure what to talk to you about specifically because there's the YouTube, then there's the social sort of almost like
Right.
an activism sort of part to it. Then there's your own what can I say? I mean, you're a model too. I think you've done
Right.
model work, right? And I was looking at your thing. I was like,
Wow.
what okay, so how do you have like a elevator pitch thing of what does Nader do? Like if I was
Yeah,
to
no, absolutely. I'm basically a storyteller, and the means in which I
right,
tell stories can vary between like content, events, or products, right?
right.
So for me, it's always just trying to find the best story and the best kind of vocabulary or means to kind of present the best story possible.
Mm,
So my work can range from creating social media content. It can range from like hosting really cool events, quirky events, and a kind of experiential kind of experience. And then even products that might kind of highlight a heritage or some sort of social impact cause.
yeah.
These are things that I'm really interested in. It's about finding really kind of relatable mediums for young people to find cool and accessible and learn something along the way.
Yeah. The heritage thing is something that I've sort of seen thread through all the things that you're doing, sort of the issues of heritage, identity, yours, the people you know. How
Right.
did that start? Like how'd you end up picking that as sort of like a vein?
I think it's kind of defined like me in my kind of crisis growing up. Crisis is a bit dramatic, but like growing up for me, I come from a mixed house,
Mm,
so like always had a strong sense of rootedness at home, but going outside I kind of felt like I never really fit into other people's boxes of identity and what they believed if heritage meant to them. So outside of the house was very kind of a tumultuous kind of difficult space to kind of navigate as a young person.
mm,
So really the work kind of and my searching for heritage and highlighting it is just coming out of a need for myself to really understand what it means to me,
right.
but also understanding that like my parents in the context of our mixed home gave me such a deep rooted like appreciation for heritage, like
Mhm.
especially being born and raised in London, a mixed heritage kid. Like heritage really decorates your life and your existence, and like it's
Yeah.
nourished and made our house so rich, not even in our own family, but the people who bring their own heritage into the house. It's such a value added and contribution to the ecosystem that is our house. That like I just loved it. And like, you travel the world and you realize, I don't talk about culture to kind of tell people how like different I am.
Mm,
Actually, it's the complete opposite. Like I travel and I love to highlight culture and heritage because it just goes to show, yes, the cosmetics might be different, but deep down, what makes that all tick and run is actually very similar.
yeah, yeah,
It's very familiar. And I might be from 4 different countries, but the root or the kind of there's an undercurrent that literally is identical, right?
yeah, yeah. No, that really
And
does come through. Like I've seen, I was watching your series on the Dopey thing with the 3-part YouTube series that you had, and I'm only from Pakistan. But even in that, I was like, oh shit, this.
are you?
Yeah, I
This is
mean,
the thing. You scratch even now. I mean, Pakistan is how
yeah,
old, right?
yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, and I'm
75 this
sure like you've
year.
got some crazy regional things happening, but like really culture and identity and
Yeah.
like it's so artificial, really. Like, what does it really mean?
I know,
Sorry, I
but
mean,
like growing up in like
down there.
yeah, but like you mentioned growing up in like a mixed race household. So let's if we were sort of to put it in 4 boxes,
Yeah,
like you said, what are those big cultures that
yeah.
you're drawing from?
So it'd be Indonesia, Kenya, Yemen, Pakistan.
Right.
So these were cultures that were ever present in my house and things that we draw from a lot. And yeah, but
Yeah, that's an unusual combination, to be honest.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, I think like that's usually the reaction that what people say when I say that. But like, interestingly, like you know, it's not at the same time. Like this is like these 4 countries are on the kind of coasts of the Indian Ocean, right? And these cultures have been communicating for hundreds of years.
mm,
Actually, like when I say I'm this mix now, it sounds very like, whoa, very unique, very different.
yeah,
But like historically, this is actually these communities have been mixing for a very long time. You'll find Pakistanis in East Africa,
yeah,
you'll find like Yemenis in Indonesia, you'll find Indonesians in Yemen. So like this transferal of like culture and heritage and community and intermarriages has been happening for a very long time. We just
yeah,
haven't realized it because it was
yeah.
never a thing before. It was just normal.
And now I suppose after like the 1950s, as countries and identities have become more bordered and defined, it's like
Yeah.
people stay
Oh
within
yeah.
those boxes usually.
Oh well, when white people invented diversity,
Yeah,
that's when
exactly.
it,
Yeah,
that's when it
yeah,
became a thing, right? So
yeah.
like, so
But no,
but
I was
diversity has
surprised. Going back to the Dopey thing, I was like, it's these. There's you, and there's this other show I saw. There's a YouTube channel by the name of Best Ever Food Review Show. They went
sure.
to Uzbekistan also, and there were
Yeah,
so many things there that are just day to day Pakistani like life that you don't even think, oh yeah, this is like just Pakistani stuff, but it's like all over Asia, and it was really sort of like that point that you said that the connections and the stories across cultures
mm,
that really came across like super immediately, like
mm,
and so that was really cool that you did that. But what I wanted to talk to you about initially was your trip to Pakistan, uh that you did earlier this year. But I sort of had to build a base of like why you wanted to go. What was
mm,
your motivation of going? Because I've been talking to a few people who are not in Pakistan or haven't grown up in Pakistan, and they visit for whatever reason, people of Pakistani heritage or maybe even not, um,
mm,
because I'm sort of going the other way, right? I was
yeah,
from that region, that's where I lived and grew up, and now
yeah,
I'm in Ireland. I don't know where I'm going next, if I'm going
yeah,
anywhere. So it's sort of like you don't really think of the sort of the diaspora experience when you're there, because you're
sure,
like, yeah, I'm in Pakistan, I'm Pakistani, everybody's Pakistani around me, right?
sure,
And
sure,
this is all there is to being Pakistani.
of
Um,
course,
and then when you take that sort of mindset out to where, oh shit, I'm not, I'm the only Pakistani here. What does that
yeah,
sort of mean? So that's sort of why I've been pursuing people. And then that's how I came across you. And you went to Pakistan. You met so many people. Like you went to Zohaib Kazi's house. I know Zohaib for a while. His
yeah.
studio
He's a
is
boy. I love that
crazy.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Mr. Bucky.
of course.
I had him on the podcast. He's also one of the cool guys from over there. So I was like, shit, man, this guy's I like his idea and the story, and he's meeting all these people who I've spoken to
Yeah,
through your
exactly.
podcast.
Thank God. Yeah, yeah. I was very
Yeah,
lucky. I think this is the thing with social media. And look, if you put good stuff out there, then you're
yeah,
gonna find good stuff. You're gonna find good people as well. And I was very
for sure.
fortunate, so much hospitality, and like I really felt embraced by the kind of Pakistani community that was doing really fascinating things.
Mm,
And I was so grateful for that because I was learning so much. So it's interesting that you say that, right? Because like I guess me and you are meeting at this question of what is Pakistaniness,
yeah.
like started from complete opposite starting points, right? You being the Pakistani, born and raised there, having left, and now you're diaspora from your own country.
Mm,
But
mm.
me being from born and raised in London, and then having this yearning to come back. But then we meet at this question of like, yo, what is Pakistaniness?
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that was the kind of undercurrent of my whole trip was this huge education around like, I might have thought I knew what Pakistaniness meant, but then like I went to Pakistan and realized that actually I had no idea what Pakistaniness meant. And like a lot of the things that got debunked for me throughout this whole process, along the way, I was helped with friends, like you
Sure.
mentioned, but like things that got debunked for me is I grew up kind of understanding Pakistaniness to be a little bit more monolithic. Like it was
Mm,
like this kind of universal term to apply to people, and we were all Pakistani. And but even the Pakistaniness in London is a very specific type of Pakistaniness, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
regional, particular types of people, etc. So my understanding of that was influenced by that. But you go to Pakistan and like probably the most amazing thing I learned was just like, especially Karachi, you go down one street and you'll hear like 8 different languages and
Yeah,
dialects.
yeah, yeah.
You'll meet Pashtuns and Balochistan, and you'll meet, the Punjabis and the Sindhis and the Kashmiris, and like, you know, you would ask someone like, people wouldn't identify as Pakistani as such from my experience, but like they would identify from like a region or like the
Yeah.
people they are and get very granular in that. And it just made me realize that Pakistan is a kaleidoscope of people and experiences. And like that I really resonated coming from London, which is a similar city in that sense. And
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
and I loved that. It made me realize there's so much to learn about Pakistan. It can never be bottled down to like a singular term.
Mm. So how did the trip like come about? Like you've probably had this sort of question for a while before the trip materialized. So
Yeah.
what really pushed it over the edge? Was it like COVID loosening up a bit? And you're like, all right, now I can go.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've been wanting to go to Pakistan since like I had a passport, but there were various issues, and either it was like family health issues and I was traveling a lot, or it was the security situation in Karachi, which 5, 6 years ago
Oh yeah,
wasn't at its best. And like,
yeah.
I would have gone, but I didn't want to make my family feel uncomfortable. So like, it was just never the right time, never the right time, never the right time. And then, I also created this like expectation in my head that when I go to Pakistan, it's going to be like
Yeah.
long trip. It's going to be amazing. And like, I wanted it to be perfect, that it kept pushing out, pushing out, pushing out. And it wasn't only until this year really that like everything aligned. So the situation felt fine. I had time, took 2 months off, and like just went. And like, it was, so yeah, it was an aligning of lots of different things.
Mm.
But I wanted to go for such a long time because like, my grandmother, what my Pakistani, my nani raised me, right? Like she was like the singular, probably like elder force in my life. And like, I love, you love your grandparents more, at times more than your parents, but like there's like a relationship there that I wanted to probe deeper.
Mm.
So through this experience, I'd be learning a lot more about my nani, and she passed away when I was about 15, 16. But there were things that like I thought I understood about her, but really they were very base level. So like my grandmother would mention Pakistan or speak to me in Urdu or show me like movies or things, but they were all fables and like these kind of conceptual terms and like bedtime stories and nothing really tangible. I didn't have really like a kind of real experience to anchor everything that she was saying. Like it was all just my imagination,
Yeah.
right? And then this Pakistan trip for me was really about crossing the dots. What's it? Crossing the T's, dotting the
Yeah, yeah.
dots. And it was being like, okay, wow, like all these things that I was born and raised to kind of be an awe in and have an appreciation for, I can see them playing out in front of me. And
Mm.
like eating at the places that my nanny would have eaten, seeing the house that she would have grown up in, it kind of allowed me to entrench deeper into the love for my grandma and not just for myself, but like, bro, I was going on this trip and like my whole family was getting emotional about certain places that they haven't seen in years. And so it wasn't really just a trip for me, but it was a trip for my family also.
Mm.
And like by me going, it opened up the door for my parents and all of them to want to go back and be like, okay, cool, like we should all go back, and we haven't been in such a long time, and open that door of rekindling that relationship also. So it had so many purposes, like emotional, sentimental, and yeah, and it was just beautiful. It lived up to everything.
I did. I was gonna ask because I have a very similar sort of vein with my nanny, who's because my family's originally from the Indian side of the border, and
Mm.
so that's over the years and through the podcast, I've spoken to people like Sparsh, right? Sparsh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
had him
Yeah, you know,
on,
the
and
people, the people's man.
there's also Anchal Malhotra. She wrote the book Remnants of Separation,
Of
and
course.
speaking to her, really, there was like this thing in my mind where, oh, our family's from India, sure. Not that you think about it on a daily basis, because like you grew up in Karachi, you're from Karachi, right? And that's your
Yeah,
identity, quote unquote. But then as you meet more and more people, they're like, oh yeah, I grew up here, but my grandparents are from there, and we go back to the village or that city, or this is where 5 generations of my family are from. For
sure.
us, there's like a stop to that, right? That this is where we are from 47 onwards. And
Yeah, yeah,
before that, it's the other side, but we can't go.
yeah, yeah.
So that's been something I've been wondering about. Like, someday we'll go to India or whatever, maybe. But
Yeah. I mean, that
the
was my
expect,
experience also, because
yeah.
they're actually Delhiwala people. So like, like I felt the same thing. It was like
Mm,
I'd open these doors to a certain history which capped at 47, just like you said.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But like, if anything, it's just made me really want to go to Delhi, which feels very inaccessible, right? But like, but I totally hear you, and it's kind of like this migrant, disconnected history where, again, like this is why I'd ask someone like you, is just like, how Pakistani can you feel when the roots are very shallow, right?
Yeah,
And like,
yeah. I
and yeah,
mean,
now I'll throw that to you, bro. Like I guess,
what I was wondering though was I have all these dreams and plans of going to Delhi, and oh, I'll learn about my family or whatever. But then I wonder, because just the mind just keeps working. Am I just building it up too much in my head that it's going to be this profound experience for me? But for
yeah.
you, it seems like you're saying it all lived up to what you were hoping for.
I hear you. I ask myself that same question. Like, or people will ask me, they'll be like, "Is it that deep though? Is it that serious?" And I think like, look, any experience with the intention you go in is
Mm,
the product you'll come out of, right? And it depends what you're looking for. And for me, like, why all of this is significant to me is, and I had a thought about this the other day, is that like, here I am in this given moment right now with you at a certain point in my life and work. I am a summation and a culmination of so many variables over a given history that have allowed me to be where I am right now
yeah,
in this moment,
yeah.
right? And I think about the breadth and scale of that over, however long my family history extends, be it like 2000 years, whatever, right? But like all of those people's struggles and sacrifices and compromises, movements, wars, difficulties, poverty, whatever, all of those difficulties and challenges were overcame to
Mm,
enable me to live the life that I'm living right now,
yeah,
right? And like the smallest thing I can do as a token of appreciation is to pay it a little bit of homage and like respect and honor it. So when I go back to Pakistan and when I go back to Indonesia, when I go back to like any country that I draw from,
mm,
it's just me basically like paying respect to all of that that's come before me to allow me to live the relative comfort that I live right now. Like, bro, like I realized the other day that I am probably the first one in both sides of the family. Like, I'm probably the first person that's allowed to do a work and a job that he's passionate about.
right, yeah,
Really
yeah,
think about like everybody
yeah,
else before, they worked for survival, right? Like whether it was agriculture, whether it was like, industry, you worked because you had a family to provide for and all that kind of stuff. But bro, I'm making videos on YouTube,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, social media, I'm traveling and I'm getting paid for it. Like what a privilege and luxury that is.
Mm,
And that would only have been possible for all the hard work to allow me to have the education and the relative privileges I have to be able to do what I do.
mm.
And like for me, I just feel like the smallest token of appreciation is to understand my heritage and my history, and pay it homage. For me it was, because that was the intention I went to go into it with. And like I feel deeply about that. And look, it doesn't mean it has to mean like that for everybody.
Sure.
Like that's just my personal relative, like, thing. Like my sister's very different, for example. I don't think she thinks about it on that kind of level. But for me, it's just my dad was a very nostalgic, romantic person, and I think I inherited that at the same time.
Yeah. So speaking of the Pakistan trip, then you're planning the trip. What's the initial
No
itinerary?
plan, bro, at
Oh,
all.
really?
If you knew me, then you know that'd be a consistent thread. I'm a kind of buy a one-way ticket kind of guy, and that's exactly what I did. So
Right.
but I have some of my nanny siblings who are there, so my nana and another nanny there. So like, I literally just bought
Where?
the one-way ticket in Karachi.
Okay.
So one-way ticket to Karachi, and then I was like, look, like, I just want to travel through Pakistan and get to know it. So I spent about 10 days in Karachi first, because Karachi is wild. Like, my favorite city in Pakistan, by the way, by far. Like,
Yeah.
Karachi is just madness, and I love that because I'm from London, so it's like a similar madness to it, and diversity also. So Karachi was super cool, and then I just went with the energy, bro. Like, if there was things happening in certain cities, I went, stayed there for a week, and then left when I was done. And that's how I like to travel, because like, you need to leave room for, when you plan too rigidly, like, your experience becomes a series of events that you've ticked off, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the way that I like to personally travel is that it's energy and you feel it, right? Go to a place, really feel like you've got to understand the tempo and the pace. When you're done with it, you move on. But like, things happen in that spontaneity, right? That you never would have imagined. Like, some random guy from a village invites you to his family house for a meal, and shows you around this beautiful valley. And then he's like, you're not leaving. You're going to stay with us, and you end up staying for 2-3 days and having the most mind-blowing experience, because you've allowed room for that to happen, right? And like, that's not really advice, but like, for me, like, in my particular context, that's what Pakistan was. It was just a series of spontaneous, beautiful moments.
Yeah. So what I was wondering though was, it's again that experience of, we're both talking about Pakistan, but because I was there for 10 years from 2000 to 2010. That was like peak,
Sure.
fucking terrorism. And then that goes on street crime and this and that. So the idea of someone, and I saw in some of the clips that you put up, you don't speak Urdu, right?
No.
You speak English and Arabic. I think you do speak.
I think English, Arabic, a bit of
One
Indonesian.
guy, yeah. One guy started talking to you in Arabic when you had gone to this place alone. And I was like, he's not, why is he alone? Whenever someone goes to Pakistan and they're like just not familiar with it and they're alone, I'm like, holy shit, is it safe for them? But everyone's like fine. So I'm like, yeah, that was just something that struck me. But anyway,
that was interesting. That was an interesting moment for me, right? And just for context, like, like, I was alone and I walked to this restaurant, which again, people are like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think, like, for me, like, you know what it is? Like, I guess, like, look, I've traveled a lot, and like, I know Pakistan it can be a dangerous, but I don't want to belittle that experience of like, it's super safe, and like, people are overreacting, and people have had real situations of gunpoint and like, being robbed in the street, call, even being, even worse. And like, I don't want to take away from that experience because it's legit. But I also think that, like, I never felt unsafe in Karachi at any given moment. Yes, everyone's carrying, like, literally everyone has like, everyone's a gun. But after you get over that, I've also been to Yemen where everyone's carrying, but you get over the kind of visual shock of it. And then it's just kind of like, you realize that, I don't know, part of me felt, and this is an unpopular opinion, and I'm actually second guessing whether I should even say it. Look, I think things 5 or 6 years ago were very bad from what I've heard, right? And I think like I would have behaved very differently if I was in Pakistan in those moments.
For sure.
But Karachi today, I mean, it was my first time. It did feel a lot safer. Pakistan in general. And like, I feel like our infatuation with safety as a result of that history can also be a crux or an obstacle to really experiencing the street life of Karachi, right? Like, imagine I was super paranoid and super like protecting myself. I never would have met that kind stranger, right? That spontaneous moment, and had dinner together with him.
Yeah.
And like, this is what one of my few critiques of like Karachi as a whole is, that I felt like it was such a disconnected society, in the sense that because of security concerns and history, that people will literally, especially if you come from a certain class, you'll be picked up in a car from point A, and you will drive to point B, get out your car, 3 steps, you're in the place that you're meant to be in. In between, there is no interaction with any humans. The only interaction you have is like with a glass window and probably someone begging to you at a traffic light, right? So what happens in terms of your real life interactions with people who are different from you?
Yeah.
Right. There's no space to cultivate empathy. There's no space to really like harness relationships or to get to know people and all that kind of stuff. And I found myself so like shut off to like the streets of Karachi in these taxis and these drivers, friends' drivers' cars and all that kind of stuff. And part of me needed to go for that walk, to be honest with you, right? It was just like, I need to feel the energy of the space. And like when I did, like things happened. And look, don't get me wrong, I don't want to belittle it again. It takes one experience to kind of like ruin all of that. But I do feel like there is a safety to be had in Karachi. But maybe a lot of people don't want, maybe.
I think it's like PTSD almost. Like the whole city is like, because the 90s in Karachi were bad. And then early 2000s, sort of, there was a bit for like a lull for a while. And then like street crime goes up. Then all of Pakistan has terrorism. So that's like a good 30 years, right? So that's like a generation that's only seen Karachi that way. And then all Pakistani cities are just so like car road focused. Like there's not much pedestrian experience anymore. And that just separates things even more because like, we don't walk anywhere. You know, like London, you can walk, it's enormous, but it's perhaps in many places better to not have a car. It's easier to not have a car and just walk or take the tube or whatever. But in Pakistan, it's like fucking
that's so that legacy of like, you know, like distrust and lack of safety, what it's done is just push people further apart. And like and I feel that, and it's sad. That's the sadness that I feel, because I think like the classes and the groups of people are becoming further and further apart. Where and that's the only thing that I felt kind of sad about. It's like, how do you bridge this society that's been so torn and fractured, and even the architecture, like you said, even the architecture of the city is facilitating that disconnect, right? Like but
so then you land in Karachi, no plan, but you stay there for like, you said 10 days or so.
I started in Karachi, I ended in Karachi, so 10 days for the first 10 days, and then just literally ate my way. I mean, my initial motive was to eat like bro, for me this is like coming back to the source. This is like Neo going back to like Machine City and like you know drinking the Kool-Aid. But like I literally came to Karachi and like foods I'd grown up in, and I'm a foodie as well, so like to have it in like the mecca of like culinary desi cuisine was like a big deal for me. So like just literally ate halwa puri in the morning, was having like kebabs at lunch, and then nahari at night, and like it was just like on rotation, just trying to go to the best places, do research, like, you know. And it was interesting because everyone had a spot, right? Everyone, and it was very different. So like there's so much to see, and like so until you finally feel like you're in a place to make a decision about what's your spot. There were also nostalgic places, like I said, like going to like family restaurants that they'd been going to for years. And I just ate my way through Karachi. I did some like cultural trips and stuff and met as many people as I could. Like, you know, this was an educational trip for me, and meeting people like you mentioned, like Zahib and Insia and you know, all these guys. Like it was really educational for me to learn the layout of the land. Like I just wanted to come to Pakistan and listen to like the conversations that are being had by like the people that have been born and raised there. Interestingly though, like, and this goes back to like the conversation we had, is like the more I was listening, the more I realized that there's a huge disconnect between like the Pakistani diaspora experience, which is my own, and other people like me, and the Pakistanis. And like one of my biggest takeaways on my first time to Karachi was this tension. Like there is a different experience and a kind of tension that underlines that the two. Like, you know, Pakistani diaspora come in feeling very Pakistani. Right. But like actually they are so disconnected from the day-to-day experience of what being a Pakistani means, which is the lack of safety and the political concerns that Pakistani feel a bit like agitated by that, rightfully so, I think, right? It's like you can't come in and I like dictate like how things should be done, or like, you know, have opinion on XYZ. You don't have to live with the day-to-day experience of what it means being a Pakistani. And learning about this was really educational for me, being like, okay, cool, like, wow, like this is one, I wanted to make sure I wasn't part of that equation, but also
Okay.
learning like what people are really feeling on the ground was fascinating. And my
Mm.
friends helped me so much with that.
Mm. How'd you find um how'd you find the people themselves? Like, were they, apart from this sort of tension thing, you're coming in as, did you find you could connect to people on the ground, like people you met through social media? Did you find that there
Yeah.
were like, presumptions that they might have had that weren't true, assumptions you might have had that didn't really, I mean, you've done this traveling thing so much that you're, I think, primed to go in with perhaps a more open mind, but you're going into what is essentially in many ways sort of an insular scene. um
Mm.
how do people react to you being there?
I think like, well, on a very basic level, like I think at some level I look Pakistani. Like
Yeah,
even though that guy started speaking to me in Arabic, which I was really shocked about.
that was,
But
yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, I was like, what? Like, how does this guy know I speak Arabic? But I think like it was just on a basic level, it was hilarious because obviously I look superficially Pakistani, and I'd come to someone and they start speaking to me in Urdu, and I would
Sure.
be like, trying to articulate, I don't quite understand, like trying to figure out what he's saying. And then they got frustrated that I wasn't understanding what they were saying. They just thought
Right.
I was slow. They just thought I was an
Oh.
idiot. Then
Okay.
they would repeat what they said, but even slower and louder and angrier.
Right,
And
right.
then I would somehow manage to be like, oh, I don't understand Urdu. And then they would get it, and then their face would soften. And they'd be
Oh,
like,
right,
oh, you're not from here. So
right.
every interaction was littered by that kind of that moment where they just
Mm.
thought I was an idiot. Basically, they just thought I was an idiot, Pakistani. Until they eventually realized I wasn't from there. But everyone was super, super warm and kind
Sure.
and hospitable. There's a kindness that kind of like permeates Pakistan as a whole. And I felt like did I feel like anything surprised me when I arrived in Pakistan? No, not necessarily. But what was I expecting? Like I always knew that Pakistan was a chaotic place. Like it was going
Right.
to be chaos. I knew it was going to be like beautiful, but also contradictory, and hospitable, but also kind of tense. And like and I came in knowing that, and nothing let me down. Like people were just as kind as I expected them to be,
Mm.
and
Mm.
there were frustrations as much as I expected them to be as well. But like yeah, in terms of one thing I struggled with is kind of trying to figure out where I fitted in this
Right.
kind of fabric that is Pakistan, and trying to find a place for myself. And I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. But like it's somewhere that
Mm.
I really want to deepen my relationship with, um and yeah. Sorry,
Where else did you go apart from Karachi? Like the big spots. Like you hit a huge number of places in those 2 months. But I'm thinking Karachi, you're familiar with, you have your own connection. It's sort of an analog to London, but the other places, the other cities even in Pakistan are much smaller. And even if they're not much smaller, their vibe is very different.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Lahore is super different to Karachi.
100%.
Islamabad is like its own thing. Was it all very
100%.
apparent to you too as you were going?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, definitely, really apparent actually. Like that actually was quite surprising actually how different it was. Again, like I
Mm.
remember, like I'm going in thinking Pakistan is like a very universal experience, but then I'm going from region to region and I'm realizing, holy cow, like things are very different here.
Yeah.
And I'm also starting to realize, like, I couldn't tell before who were the Punjabis, who are the Sindhis, who are the Balochistan people, who are like the people from the north, the Kashmiris, etc. I couldn't differentiate before, but like all my friends would be able to be like,
Yeah.
they could tell who was who. But slowly, the more time I spent there, I'm starting to like really identify like accents and start getting
Mm.
an ear for it, and like realizing, okay, cool, this person's from here. And so coming from Sindh, and I traveled around Sindh as well. I was in Karachi. We also went to like, Tata. I went to Makli Hills, and we got to see all of that. And sadly missed Savin, which I'll come back for. But
Mm.
got to see the Sindh and the desert side of that part of Pakistan. Traveled into Punjab. I went to Lahore, and like Lahore as a regional capital was entirely different from Karachi. Like
Mm.
Lahore was absolutely stunning in a kind of cultural, historical sense, but a totally different tempo to
Mm-hmm.
Karachi entirely. And like
Yeah.
what was really palpable about Lahore is that Lahore is a Punjabi city. like it felt like a Punjabi city from my experience anyway. Like whereas Karachi felt like anybody's city.
Yeah.
Like Lahore felt like it was really a strongly rooted Punjabi city, and there are some benefits and disadvantages to both, right? Like I love the diversity in Karachi because it means you have everything there.
Yeah.
There was a rootedness in Punjabi which you didn't really quite feel in Karachi, in
Yep.
Lahore, sorry, that you didn't feel in Karachi.
Yeah.
And things like recipes that lasted for like hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Structures, buildings that have been there hundreds of years. Like there's a rootedness in Lahore that I think also you feel it in the people, right?
Mm.
There's less tense because
Oh, yeah.
again, people are a lot more secure in who they are. And Lahore, and yeah, Punjabis are very chill, very nice people. And then you would go to Islamabad, which was a whole another kettle. It was like, not gonna lie, no offense to Islamabad people, but like Islamabad was just like not necessarily my vibe.
Sure.
Like it was not really what I went to Pakistan for. Like
Yeah.
it was.
What was the vibe you got from Islamabad?
Islamabad, look, Islamabad was it's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Like stunning. Like, it's got this kind of surrounding of mountains
Yeah.
and nature. Really actually fresh air, which in Karachi and Lahore, like it's
Yep.
very difficult to come by, and the weather was stunning at that time, yeah. And Islamabad, it just felt like it felt kind of artificial is the wrong word, but it felt planned. It felt very planned, right? And like, when someone plans too much where they're taking the fun out of it, like at a party and it's like, oh, designated to have fun, but then like no one's really having fun because everyone said you had to have fun. Like it felt kind of like that kind of vibe, and it kind of felt like, there is also different class,
yeah, for sure,
nuances there, which felt very different. And like, I know that's also a cliche, but like in Islamabad, it kind of felt like it was you had to know people to really get around, and like it was a who's who kind of crowd. But then very lucky enough, like we met some amazing people in Islamabad also that break out of that stereotype. And I think what was interesting in Islamabad for me was just how bad the food was. And that's not like, I don't mean to take a stab. I don't mean to take a stab at institutions or whatever, but like I'm coming from Karachi and Lahore, right? I'm eating at like some of the best food streets in Karachi. I'm going to Lahore, I'm having like some of the best halwa puri I've had in my life. And I come to Islamabad and it's like, what? Like this is the most affluent city in Pakistan, but also like the food is like the worst. Didn't make any sense to me. It blew my mind, right? Like, when someone, you have these Western institutions also, and it's just kind of, like why? I felt like the best food in Islamabad was Afghan food.
You went to Kabul?
Kabul was amazing.
Bro,
Shinwari kebab, Khyber Shinwari kebab.
Mad. Yeah.
like Kabul is like one of the best restaurants, Afghan restaurants I've been in the world.
Period.
Yeah. And my cousin who was working in Kabul said Kabul in Islamabad is still one of the best Afghan restaurants, he said. And that was interesting for me because it says a lot about the kind of Pakistani the Islamabad demographics, right? This huge influx of Afghan migrants coming in, and like they are having an influence now on like on Pakistani cities, right? And I think that's fascinating to witness also. But Islamabad really for me was just kind of a throughway into the north, and it was a nice place to relax, and that what I will really appreciate it for. I really needed those 3 days just to kind of be in nature, relax. I had phone signal. You didn't feel like you were on edge, and like, and I'm really grateful for that. Look, like if I was raising a family in Pakistan, actually no, I was gonna say if I was gonna say if I was gonna raise a family in Pakistan, maybe I think about Islamabad because of how things work there and it's safer. But nah, honestly, still be correct.
No, I mean I went to Islamabad for the first time properly this past year, just December, January, same period you were there, and I got that vibe. Like, if you have people there, you can hang out with them, but there's not really that many places to hang out at. So, you just hang around with your parents or something. My parents were there. I was at my wife's house and her parents were there. It was a circle. So wherever that, then if you have like a circle, it doesn't matter where you're going because the circle is what's important, right? You're with the people. But then I did go to Kabul and I was like, they bring you that broth, that like some sort of stock or something at the start. And I was like, this place already has won. Like the food hasn't even come out yet. And I was like, this is just so good. But then, you You go to the
Like
north.
Islamabad is interesting for me. I think Islamabad, like, look, I come from London. A lot of the like the kids and a lot of the cool kids you'll meet there are like these are people who probably studied abroad. They're trying to
Yeah,
create
yeah.
little Western enclave or what things that they want there. And Karachi and Lahore just felt a bit more kind of proudly Pakistani.
Hmm.
I don't even know if
Or
that's the right word.
secure in their own identity.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
where like culture was more apparent, and look, what I
Hmm.
was looking for coming from Pakistan, that's what I was looking for, and
Hmm.
like Islamabad at a different given time might give me something that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like I said, like I appreciated Islamabad for giving me a certain level of security and like and comfort, and I needed that at that time. But like,
Hmm.
uh, there are things happening societally in Islamabad which are very interesting. It's a very unique place, and like I think the money that runs through that really dictates the personal relationships that people make with one another. There's a status thing which I kind of felt like I didn't quite understand because I didn't grow up part of it.
Yeah.
But there's like a behaviorisms between people and certain families, and like
Yeah.
and like and like part of me, I'm a lefty Londoner, man. So like for part of me is like this is like I don't get that world, and I never will. But like so
It
there's that
is
part of it.
elite by design, I think.
Exactly. And look,
Yeah.
I don't want to slam on it because it's also not my lived experience and this is how things go. But I kind of, that was one thing that just was very alien to me that I find very difficult to resonate with. Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like, I was always born and raised with the idea that like, the more power and responsibility, the more power you have, the more responsibility you have. And I felt like things are a bit, status was used as a means of differentiating with one
Oh yeah,
another.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And like even these ideas of like, oh man, even like these ideas of like gymkhanas, right? Right.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't offend anyone or anything, but this is just like my genuine, like, it's this idea of, it's very like, I felt like this, the members club is a
Mm-hmm.
British export, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
the British members club started here, where it was like old rich men in bow ties and women weren't allowed. And like the whole idea was to kind of like, this is a space for us and not for you. And then they exported that model into colonial South Asia. And like, you're seeing these kind of these spaces that differentiate on class and like and affluence being recreated, and it's just like there's something uncomfortable
Yo, so
about it.
that's a cool thing. Well, not cool, but interesting. We were talking about the, local versus diaspora experiences, sure. But you grew up in the UK, so you're like intimately familiar with British, society, class
Sure.
differences, power, structures, whatever. When you go abroad, they've been everywhere, right? They had the whole world nearly as part of the empire. Many of those
Yeah,
places have held on to, like you were mentioning, these sort of old colonial institutions, some more than others. But, now those, like the British have left, but
yeah,
those ideas of stratified power have been like sort of embraced by the local
right.
population in that same sort of segregating way. Does
Yeah,
that
exactly.
strike you as weird that people did it? Does it make sense that
I
people
think it
just
makes sense. I don't have to agree with it, right? Like I
right?
understand why it's happening.
Okay.
Like, and I think like you try to recreate the power structures of your former oppressor, right? When you've been oppressed for X amount of time,
Hmm.
you and then there are people who suddenly grab that power and
Yeah.
have an access to it. They seek to recreate the same obstacles for other people so that they cannot take away their power, right? So that's what I see. And like for me, like look, look, there's nothing wrong with these like look, these spaces have a right to exist because
Yeah.
there is something about community and people who are like-minded and you sharing space with them. I understand that. But it's the culture in which you define that separation, right?
Hmm.
If it's purely based on like nepotism and like, or you have to earn a certain GDP per capita, you're sending a certain ethos out there that like you genuinely believe you are better than some people, even though a lot of people don't think like that. But it's the undercurrent of these spaces. It kind of the veins,
Hmm.
the kind of culture that runs through the veins is built upon those foundations. And I'm just asking if there's a better way to do that. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I'm just saying there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
why is this important? Because then I see it trickles down to like politics and society, is that it's a weird sense of like champagne tribalism,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense, right? It's like, and even pre-colonialism, like our communities have been like this, right? We have to
Hmm.
put our hand up and being like, whether it was like even pre-Islamic caste systems, whether it was other cultural means of like separating, ourselves from one another, humans have always done that, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like when I see such obvious and deliberate means to make yourself feel better than someone else, then I feel a bit uncomfortable with that. And like,
Yeah.
imagine growing up in that context. I think this is what I think about myself, because we didn't grow up in much, to be honest, here. Like, we didn't grow up, like I grew up in a basement flat, and like, we didn't have much, but like I always used to think, imagine growing up with everything at your disposal. Imagine growing up with like 20 staff at your beck and call.
Yeah.
Right? How does that affect the psyche of a young person to feel like I am entitled to certain things,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I'm better than this person? And like, I have cousins who have, I'm not jabbing anyone who does, but like what I am asking is like, in the long run, how does that affect our ability to empathize with people who are different from us? Like,
Yeah.
like, this is why I think people in Islamabad are so different to people in other cities, is because Islamabad is a protected little bubble.
Yeah.
So if this bubble becomes more of a bubble, and these are the people, arguably, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Islamabad, this is where people are making the decisions politically, in terms of business, all that kind of stuff. If you start to create this safe bubble that is disconnected from all the issues around you, then how are you able to empathize with like people
So
who are
that
going
is,
through?
yeah, that is something that a couple episodes ago I was talking to somebody who runs a podcast out of the US, but it's based on Pakistan's economy and politics, and how those two intersect. And one of the things was that nearly, like, you as a normal person growing up in Karachi, you will never be in politics because you just can't afford it. You're just too busy, caught up in your life, your job, your kids, your rent, all of that. And everyone who is in politics is there because they can afford to be. So they're all massively rich, right? And then there's that obvious disconnect then, because you were never poor, not you were never even middle class. So you have
Yeah,
no connection, no empathy. It's to an extent not even your fault, perhaps. I mean, you're incompetent if you're not like making an
yeah,
effort to learn, but you just don't know. You just care about the tax laws that affect your factories. You don't
of
care about the
course.
people working in those factories because you were never one of them. You grew up with a factory. So
Yeah,
that's a thing in Pakistan. Islamabad was created, right? It didn't exist until the 1960s.
yeah,
Karachi was the capital, and then they moved to this place for whatever security strategic reasons.
yeah.
Um, so
I
that
have,
is
I
what
have like,
happens.
I have like uncles who would be like, "Oh yeah, this is what Pakistan could be
Yes,
when we come into Islamabad,"
yes.
and I'm kind of like,
Do
I'm
you
kind
want
of
that?
dead. Yeah, kind of dead. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't have to explain it, but look, I don't really have a right to really like say, the political ramifications or what that means, because one, like, there's a lot more that I can learn about it. I think what I want to focus is on like the people, right?
Mm,
And like, for me, I really feel like all of this has a trickle down effect, and like, I just feel like there are segments of society that are so separate. And to compare it with my, in a London experience, and I think what's unique about London and anywhere else in the world is, in the most affluent area, you will have the biggest estates.
mm.
So you will have like working class people, and side by side, like the opposite end of the
Yeah,
spectrum.
yeah, yeah.
So, and it's a pedestrian society. So you will walk, and even if you're very rich, you will have to see how the other side lives, right? You will have to experience that. You will have to interact with them. They might be your neighbors,
Mm.
right? So you cultivate relationships with people who are very different from you. And what that enables is just like broader empathy amongst people, to be able to be like, know their name, know
Yeah,
like a little bit more than who they are. These people become human to you, right?
yeah.
And I think there's something in that. But but also, just to break the stereotype and the cliche, like, there are things happening in Islamabad that are so amazing, and like not everyone thinks this way. And we arrived in Islamabad, and that night we were at one of the chai dabas, and there was like these really cool kids, like live music, and it was free. They were inviting everyone
Mm.
to come to like this fireside, and it was a fire, and they were playing like these drum circles. And I was like, oh wow, like this shatters every like preconceived like stereotype of like bougie Islamabad, with like
Yeah.
moments like this. So like there are like emerging young people doing really interesting things, and like that warmed my heart a lot. And like um and yeah, that gave me a soft spot for Islamabad to a certain extent.
After Islamabad, you go to the north, which is Pakistan's biggest tourist export advertisement thing. Come to Pakistan, we have great mountains. Um, and even in Pakistan, everyone's like, if you come, like people from Karachi will say, come to Karachi and then go to the north, right? Nothing
Yeah,
in between. How
yeah.
was your experience? Because in the past couple of years, one thing that has happened a lot is a lot of foreign, or to use another word, white YouTubers, vloggers, etc., have come to Pakistan, and there's this undercurrent that's developed of like resentment in Pakistani society, where, or at least people who are internet savvy, they're like
Mm,
these all these creators. They come, they don't have a lot of you know following, they don't have a big subscriber base, etc. They come to Pakistan,
mm,
and when they leave, they're huge, right? And they're like established entities. And
yeah,
there's another tension there where local Pakistani content creators are never given that sort of attention or focus or whatever. But
sure.
also, the people come and they're like, oh, everyone's so nice to me, and Pakistan is so safe, and people are inviting me into their homes and giving me free food, and no one's letting me pay. And it's like, people in Pakistan don't necessarily like that image. They're like,
Sure.
yeah, they're like, I don't think you made an effort. Everyone in Pakistan is poor. You're coming in as somebody who has, more money,
Mm,
at least in the forex exchange sort of perspective. And they were sort of like, it's almost like people aren't happy that Pakistan is popular. In
yeah.
Pakistan, after decades of being like, we're not terrorists, we're good people. You should come to
Mm.
Pakistan. And as soon as the internet shows up, they're like, okay, maybe don't don't come to Pakistan. But how was your experience in the north? Like you had like a lot of stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a few things there. So, like, with the case of like the white YouTuber, etc., like,
Mm,
uh, there is a lot of issues. I think, like, for me, there are, and I know a lot of these people because it's like the world I'm in, and like, I think my issue particularly is when we travel, there's a certain etiquette to travel. At least that's how I was raised, right? Like, you know, a culture isn't something to be kind of, I always ask this question, like, what is authentic traveling? Like, how do you experience authentic culture? And it's not something you can buy. It's like not a talk package, right? It's not like a cookie cutter process where like you go and you live with a family and like you
mm,
have an authentic experience. Like, authenticity is shifting every single second. Like, really, the authenticity is only lasts as long as that given moment, right? And for me, like, when I travel to a space, it's about like having the luxury or the opportunity to just sit there and melt in the city, right? Like, crazy eclectic things don't need to be happening for me to have like a real experience. And like when I was in the north, like I went and I didn't have a plan because I didn't want to do these tour. Like, so many people were telling me to go on these tour packages. So many people were telling me to go on these like planned out routes where you would
mm,
go to these certain places. And I was like, look, for some people that might make sense for them, but for me, like, I really want to get a sense of the space and the people. So it just turned up, and then ended up like eventually like staying with this like family and just staying there, like, and every day wasn't like some wild roller coaster of experiences. It was just small minor interactions with people at the square, sitting 3 4 hours and doing nothing, having some chai. But that was the real experience that I needed to have in that given moment. It wasn't about going to the tallest peak or like going to this like suspension bridge that like
mm.
whatever, like the very like cliche things. What I needed right there was like to feel the people and to talk to them and to have real conversations, and that's what I was looking for. But the case of like the white YouTuber is look, it's a double, it's tough. Like, my issue with them is I feel like they don't really understand the culture any more than when they first arrived. It's like, okay, cool, you can speak you can say a couple of the words, but how much have you really understood about some of the socio-political things that are happening, the challenges of the people? Like, are you going to go back to your friends in the UK or the US and be like, actually, no, Pakistan is like very different because of these situations? And there are very few people who do it I think, on that level. When
Yeah.
they come, it's like, oh, I had the spiciest curry on Burns
Yeah.
Road, or like, like, and it's kind of like great, like, to
Yeah.
food talk, but how much of it has been a reciprocal transferal of benefit and learning? Like, that's how I like to see my travels, is like, I'm coming in, I'm taking something from this place, right? Like, I go to the north, I'm taking inspiration. This place is beautiful, it's giving me peace. Like, what am I doing to give back to this place? as a thank you, like genuinely as a thank you. Like I always think that when I travel is like, I should be leaving something for this place for what it's given me.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of YouTube content creators in general and journalists and like lots of people is that they come in thinking about the story they can take out.
Mm.
But then once they're out there, like it's done. There's no transactional relationship there. And like for me, I just think there should be a broader travel culture around people who go to places such as Pakistan, especially the developing world. And like they should be thinking about how can I make this reciprocal, and in which I've left the place a little bit better than like how I found it. And it doesn't have to be huge, but just something, you know, symbolic that shows that like, you know, there's a deeper spiritual meaning of why you're here, not just a cash cow or a follower cow or whatever you want to see it. But like
Yeah.
also like I'm a content creator, but I wasn't treated in the same way that white YouTubers are treated when they come to Pakistan.
Yeah. Is it
Right?
because you're not
Like
white?
this is the thing. Like I'm British. I'm
Mm.
like from the West. Most of my audience is from the West, right? But like Pakistan, a lot of Pakistanis, I guess, weren't as interested as another brown guy coming back to Pakistan to try out certain foods, etc., which I understand at some level.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like when all these white YouTubers come to Pakistan and they post about Pakistan, it's Pakistanis following them,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
So like
Yes.
ex-girl might come to Pakistan and witness Pakistan, but she might jump 100,000 followers in a week. But those 100,000 probably are Pakistani men, most
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah. Yes.
right? So like, who are you complaining about? Like, they're not getting global, like, you know, they're not having a global reputation. Like,
I don't think people realize that part of it. They just see the number go up and they're like,
exactly.
oh,
But there's nuance there, which I think also
yeah.
people need in their critique, they need to realize, right? Because I think the critique is a bit lazy.
Mm.
It's like there are societal things happening here about why, you know, that allows someone. But obviously, like all of us at some level, to play devil's advocate, all of us like to see someone that we would never associate with this space having something that we grew up with. There's a genuine curiosity. Like me,
Mm.
another brown guy coming to Pakistan and having another Nihari, everyone's like, man, we see
Yeah.
this literally every single second of our
Yeah. Yeah.
life. But if it's a white girl
Yeah.
and she's like from the Alps and she's coming in blonde, blue eye, going into Bonds Road, people like are losing their minds. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand why they are.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but I can understand why it's novel.
Mm.
So last thing on that is that what I've come to realize, especially with my conversations with people like Mr. Paki and like other people I really look up to in the Pakistan space is, you know, someone like Mr. Paki should be a lot more followed, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
like, you know, even Khawla, who runs this, she's a journalist as well.
Yes.
And
Great
these are people
photographer.
who should have, and look, this is the online space is littered with people who should have more
Yes.
followers,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But that's not how it works, sadly. But then I'm coming in with my experience and I'm being like, why isn't that the case? So like, and what I've come to realize is that, look, like diaspora, especially where we have a role to play, is that, look, we are of Pakistan, but we are of the West also, of Britain. And our role, our unique role in which we can only do is that we understand at some level the cultural things that are happening in our countries of residence, our heritage, but we also speak in a Western vernacular, a Western vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
We can communicate with our audience in a way that they understand, right? And like where they resonate with, because we're London. Like people see me as a London boy. So when I, as Nadir, go back to Pakistan, they still see that London boy in Pakistan. But then he's talking about how beautiful Pakistan is. He's introducing me to people like Mr. Peck. He's showing me this world, but he's still a London boy. I'm that bridge for London to come on this Pakistani journey with me. And that's my role as a diaspora content creator, is to speak the language and the lingo and to express it in a way that they understand, that highlights the voices in these countries also that should be followed more. And that's what I've come to realize throughout my trip is my role as a content creator, is being a funnel, being a vehicle, being a translator, being a bridge into a culture that people had never had access to before. And yeah.
Because so much of the relationship with content creators online is that familiarity and that, you know, we're on the same level. This vlogger that I'm watching and me, living the same experiences, or he speaks the same way as I do. And regardless of how good Mr. Paki might be, you know, he doesn't have that bridge with everybody. So it's just that the nature of the thing, it's not like Mr. Paki isn't famous abroad because people hate Pakistan. It's just that familiarity thing that they just haven't had that bridge to connect to them. So that does make sense what you were saying, yeah, because that's what
Like even
everyone.
like even like people like Howler and people of that quality,
Mm,
right? Um, like why aren't more Pakistanis following them,
why aren't more Pakistanis following them? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And like for me, like I don't have that many like Pakistanis following me. Most of mine is like Europe, but like
Mm,
question is why isn't there an appetite within Pakistan for this? And then you have to ask yourself as a content creator, who is my target audience? Am I targeting Pakistanis? Then should I be speaking a certain languages? Should I be talking a
mm,
certain way? So really, it's a very complex thing, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um, because like people who talk on that level, for example, if you talk English and you talk at a very intellectual level, you're targeting a very specific Pakistani society,
A very small part of society.
very small,
Yeah,
right? So like the
yeah.
scale isn't necessarily going to be there. You're not going to have millions of followers like a Eva Zubek who goes and she lives with the Wahi people, and of course like everyone friggin' loves it because
Yeah,
it's simple content, right? So it's very different, and I think there's more to that conversation than what people think. It's not just some
yeah. There's
you know
ways, there's like a lot of levels to it. Like, what socioeconomic, obviously, where you grew up, which defines where you went to school, who you met, how
yeah
you speak. And I think
yeah
people
yeah
in Pakistan don't realize how big Pakistan is in terms of population.
yeah
Because I'm sure you must have seen this, like in Karachi, it's 20 million people, but the people there have this vibe where, like, yeah, we know everyone. We have a connection or a friend or someone everywhere.
yeah
And they might, but their everywhere is a very small part of Karachi. And there's like 19 million people who you have no connection with. But we
yeah
don't really. It took me like ages because I grew up mostly in the Middle East, so Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Spent only
yeah
10 years in Pakistan. When I come back from Pakistan to Abu Dhabi, I'm meeting people. I'm like, oh yeah, you're from Karachi, yeah, sure. My band played at your university, sure, yeah. And I'm like, oh shit, I know everybody. But then I'm like, yeah, the people I'm meeting here are from the same sliver of
exactly.
socioeconomic reach that I am.
And it is a small world, and
Yeah,
like it's not as many people as you think it might be. And
yeah.
like look, what I've come to learn is that like that there is a relationship to be had between Pakistanis and diaspora Pakistanis. And I
Mm,
think like if you are a content creator of diaspora of diaspora background, then I would urge you to think about your role as this bridge and this communicator, because there are people doing amazing things like and platforms that I've learned from. And like for me, like especially the content that I made, I'm trying to put my friends on blast, right? So it's about sharing people who are on the ground, dealing with this stuff every day, who know so much more about the situation than I do. And I met everywhere I went, every city, I met amazing people that did that. And
mm.
like so really like that there is a collaboration to be had, and we can translate it to a different audience, but really like we should be listening to people who have cultivated really like nuanced perspectives on things that are happening there.
I saw you post pictures from Pakistan during your trip there. It was featured in a few newspapers. Do you have like something else, like a video or something coming out
Yeah,
on
I
the
have a
trip?
YouTube video coming out, hopefully, inshallah, end of this month.
Okay.
It's just taking a lot longer to put together than I had
Your
initially planned.
videos, uh, sorry to interrupt you, but speaking of, I've
Like,
seen a lot of your videos, right? Are you just like self-taught or did you
yeah,
go to
bro, it's
school?
exhausting. Oh my goodness, it's like literally, I'm a self shooter really when I go on travels like that. Or it depends on the project. Some projects I might have a team. I'll be lucky enough to have a team. But when I travel like that, it's just me, my camera, and
Hmm.
I'm presenting. I'm DOPing. I'm producing everything at the same time, and it's exhausting because like you have to think multiple angles, and you have to
Yeah, yeah,
think like
yeah,
I get the soundbite that I wanted, and it can be very very challenging.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's
But no,
it's it's
you have like a really like unique or aesthetic to your
oh,
videos. Like it comes out like the clearest in like like your Vimto Ruavza, those videos. That's
yeah.
like what I've now started to associate with, like, okay, this is what Nadir's videos look like. But
Thank you.
then
Yeah.
that's like that's no one else looks like that. But yeah, I was just wondering, and this is just something you because you started YouTube videos
Hobby,
and
yeah, bro. Literally, like just like I started with pictures actually.
okay.
I did it as a hobby, and I was living in Jordan, and then just loved it, and then developed into like video, and just kept practicing and self-taught myself Premiere, and
Mm,
started making videos, and just got better and better with it as the more time I put in. But like
very good.
Yeah. It takes a while. People think it's really like unattainable to get like
No,
to a certain
yeah,
level of
yeah,
competency in these things. It's not. Nothing is unattainable. It's just you have to put the time in. And like I put a
yeah,
lot of time in. So
yeah.
like if you want to get good at it, you just gotta practice. And then I just would travel and I would capture things and yeah, so yeah, practice makes perfect.
Do you think you're gonna go back to Pakistan anytime in the
100%. I'm
foreseeable?
already
Oh,
planning
okay.
like a trip in autumn, maybe December.
For
So I want
real?
to go autumn. I want to see the Kalash, and they have like a festival in autumn.
Yes, they do.
Um, and I would really love to go see that. But definitely coming back in December and bringing my mother with me. She hasn't been back in like 30 years.
Okay.
So really hoping to do that for her as well. And yeah, so look, like now that I've opened the door, I imagine going to Pakistan every year, and I really want to deepen that relationship with it I have for myself. So my kids have it also.
Mm.
And I feel like I have a community now in Pakistan,
Mhm.
like friends and people to go back to, people that pick me up from the airport, people that take me out for dinner, and family. And that was the most priceless thing of this whole trip was developing those relationships with my people that are there, and I'm very grateful for that. So like there's lots to come back for. And also there's so much to see. I didn't go to Kashmir, I didn't go to Balochistan, I didn't go to like, KKP. There was a lot of places I have to go back to. And I'm really looking forward to like seeing them as much as possible.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I have so much more to talk to you about, like your Benny space thing, all the other places, Yemen, Indonesia, all this. But for the interest of keeping an episode
Edit.
on topic
Good
and
luck
the
with
edit,
that.
yeah, I'm gonna wrap this here. December, I don't know. It seems like a lot of people are coming to Pakistan again in December. Like this past
Yeah,
December was crazy. I think because
it
after
was
COVID, the whole world descended.
exactly.
But like this December 22, I'm making plans. So if you're there, which I hope you are,
Bro,
I'm gonna find you
100%.
there. Yeah.
100%. Where
Yeah.
you're in Dublin, right?
I'm in Dublin.
Cool.
Yeah. I'll come to
I got
London before that. But
I might be in Dublin. I might be in Dublin for a wedding actually in November. So if not
oh,
then,
okay,
then
cool, cool, cool.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for sure. And
Um,
just
yeah.
if I said anything that was like mad controversial that's gonna get me cancelled,
No, no,
then
it's
then
fine.
just, make sure you save my life and you delete it.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's an unstated service we offer all our
I'm gonna
guests.
have like I'm gonna have like the Lahoris coming for me, the Islamabad people coming for me, then I'm gonna have like
The lucky thing is Islamabad has very few people, so not many people are coming after you. No, all right, but another where should people go to find your work?
yeah, I think the best place is go to Instagram. Find me on
Okay.
Nadir.Nahdi. And then through there you can see all my other work. That's all linked in there. But check it out and
Yeah.
send me a DM if you hate it.
Yeah. Okay, but don't DM us. We're not
No,
responsible.
no.
All right, man. Thank you very much. I'm gonna have you back. I'm just letting you know.
Anytime, bro.
All
I'm
right.
sorry
Well,
it takes so long to do this.
no. Maybe I'll just find you somewhere in London, and that'll be easier. But
Absolutely.
it's been a pleasure talking. Thanks everyone for
Likewise,
watching.
my brother.
This has been Nadir, and we'll see you next time. Bye.